November 25th, 2024, coming to you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee, here at the historic Wall Center. And this show, a presentation of Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets, so whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION when opening that account. Matt Sekarson alongside Blake Price. Four-time Juno Award winner Mike Rogerson hitting switches, conducting things alongside intern Jacob Fraser. Got a big show coming up for you. And we'll start with the Surrey Mitsubishi poll question before we get in to another road victory for these Vancouver Canucks and some encouraging news from practice today. At Boston University. Scene of the great Aaron Rome suspension news.
That's right.
We had to head on off to BU, Dave Tomlinson's alma mater, right? In between games of the Stanley Cup Final in 2011. That's when we heard that Colin Campbell had recused himself from the administration of supplemental discipline on Aaron Rome for his hit on Nathan Horton. That's where we learned that Mike Murphy in Campbell's stead was taking over the file and that he had consulted with Francesco Aquilini enemy Brian Burke, who previously held the post. Remember? Disciplinarian. That's where the shit hit the fan with Aaron Rome, because the Vancouver Canucks were despondent as a group, right? Coaches and players alike, and management and ownership was absolutely furious with the league.
And Mike Murphy and Coley Campbell etched their names into Canuck history from there on in.
Boy, they sure did. They sure did. 2-1 series at that point for the Canucks. I'll never forget the cab ride back from Boston University to our location there at the bar, the Harp, right across from the TD Bank North Garden. Exactly, where I had to quickly sit down and pen for the Globe at the time.
I'll never forget our chat with.
I'll
never forget Aaron Rome chatting with us about a year and a half ago on this show, and where he said it still haunts him.
It's still, yeah. He's out there tilling the land in Manitoba, farming, and it's just anytime Boston University comes up in a Canucks contest, I think of that. And let's hope Tom Wielander and Nathan Celebrini change the narrative there, right?
Yes.
We got a couple of decent Canucks prospects at Boston University. Okay, Surrey Mitsubishi poll question. Is Kiefer Sherwood the long-lost winger for Elias Pettersson? You can vote yes or no. Do so at the Sekarson Price X and YouTube channels. Blake, I can't believe we're here because Kiefer Sherwood was a journeyman, late blooming, bottom six forward in Nashville and looked like he would be a very nice bottom six addition for the Vancouver Canucks. But given the heater he's on, given the way he plays and that meshing with Elias Pettersson the way he plays, I voted yes. He's been too good to ignore, and you're starting to get, and we've talked about this for a couple weeks now, you're starting to get Alex Burrows for the Twins vibes with him. If not that, at the very least, at Jannik Hansen vibes. But yeah, I voted yes after watching that game on Saturday.
Hey, I'm hoping, for the fans' sake here, I'm hoping the answer is yes. And if he was 26 or 27, Matt, I might be tempted to say yes.
So 29 makes the difference for you?
It does.
Okay.
Because I think the ability to be consistent enough would have played itself out in his NHL career to this point.
That's the thing, though. Like, late blooming means late blooming.
This is late blooming.
Boy. Yeah, no, because
by today's standards.
Burrows was already a fixture before this age.
We've had late blooming goaltenders. Who do you think of when you think of late blooming position players? The only guy that springs to mind for me is Jason Blake, who I think was in his second half of his 20s when he first broke through with Well, he was a 25-goal scorer before that. Then he got 40 with the Islanders when he was 33.
Yeah, late blooming goaltenders has been a thing, including the guy on the other end in that 2011 Cup final. You may remember. He was not exactly a bona fide NHL star in his 20s. But, yeah.
Now, Jason Blake was 29 years old when he broke through with 25 goals.
Well, okay, that's it then. Then he's the guy. Sherwood's on a contract this year and next. They do have him on term. They gave him the second year, right? They want to make sure they got him. Turns 30 at the end of March, so turns 30 within the body of this NHL regular season. And, if you don't know his story, he bounces around a little on some bad teams in Anaheim, Colorado, and yet somehow found a footing with the Nashville Predators and is sitting there tied for the Canucks lead in goals nearly a quarter of the way through the season. We'll put you down for no price.
Yeah.
Last chance to take advantage on specials on 2024 models at Surrey Mitsubishi. When you trade in any vehicle on a new 2024 Surrey Mitsubishi, going to give you $3,000 above market value for your trade. You can take advantage of rates as low as 1.9%. You get the extended warranty on the 2024 PHEV. It's what I'm driving. It's what Blake's driving. At no charge, plus $1,000 credit towards winter tires. Only while inventory lasts, only at Surrey Mitsubishi. We are heading on out there to pick up that pre-owned for Carmen I was telling you about last week. So looking forward to seeing Daniel and the great team. 13820 104th Avenue in Surrey, or online at surreymitsubishi.ca. We'll get to our top story. Brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, and Yellow Dog Spirits, Foolish Winery. Road Warriors. The Canucks improved to 7-1 on the road by dispatching the Ottawa Senators 4-3 in the nation's capital Saturday, minus captain Quinn Hughes, who gets tossed from this game early, and by playing keep away in the third period to run out the clock. Jake DeBrusk with 2 goals. We know he's streaky. He's now up to 5 goals and 13 points in 19 games. And he was talking in the postgame about how it was good that when they got that lead, they were able to finish it off. Here's DeBrusk.
Yeah, obviously it was a much-needed win. It's with Quinn being out, with the guys that were missing and stuff like that. But, we came together as a group, and I thought we had a pretty solid 40-minute stretch after that power play they had. I thought that's where we were starting to implement our game, and we got some bounces because of it. And then, in the last 5, obviously they're going to have a push, and they got lots of good players over there. So, we were able to hold on.
They had late power plays. They went 6-on-5, obviously. And the Canucks had 5 defensemen. So, where are you going to feel 5 defensemen? In minute 50 on in particular. And so there was a pushback there from the Senators. I mean, it would have been the tidiest of tidiest wins if they win that game 4-1. I don't think it takes away from me, given the circumstances, the fact that it ends up 4-3. It doesn't bother me at all. And it shows the resilience of the Canucks to hang on.
Well, killing that 5-minute power play early, as you often see when you get a bad break like that and lose a player and you're on that penalty kill for 5 minutes. Typically, if you can kill it off without surrendering a goal, it gives your team a boost. It demoralizes the other side, and I think that's absolutely what happened here. Pettersson, another 2-assist game. That's points in 4 straight for Elias. 4 multi-point games in the last 7. Alas, he didn't hit my 12 points in 8 games, Blake. He only had 10. So
you're way off.
No, I felt he was.
No,
at the time I said it, I was like, all the signs are there that this guy's playing well, and now it's just about a breakout in points. And if he keeps playing like that, the points will come. And sure enough, they did.
Well, Matt, we get the 20-game report card after tomorrow night's game. Mm-hmm. If he has a 2-point night, not crazy. He's had a couple of them recently. If he has a 2-point night, he's got 17 points in 20 games. Like an 85-point year is like almost a guarantee at that point, given the trend here.
Well, guarantee is strong, but
But
He'd have how many points?
He would have 17 and 20. So the math would be just below a point per game.
Yeah,
but
it'd be closer to 70, yeah.
No, on the pace. But but if you look at the last dozen games, that pace is dramatically different. So what I'm saying is the next 20 games, I would bet the next 20 games, after this 20 games is over, he's above a point per game for that quadrant. So, he's trending in the right direction.
Yep. Sherwood with a goal and an assist. It's the second 4-game point streak of his season. He did not have one previously in his NHL career. So he has had the 2 hottest stretches over 4 games of his NHL career here this season in the opening quarter with the Vancouver Canucks. It's his 3rd multi-point effort of the year. He had 5 all of last year. In fact, we went digging through his game log last year in Nashville. There is a stretch from the end of December through January, February, and the first little bit of March where Kiefer Sherwood has 1 point over 20 games. 1. I don't think he had a single point in the month of February last year. And yet here he is riding shotgun on what is now the Canucks top line with JT Miller out and doing it not only to these levels point-wise, but it was another 10-hit game for Kiefer Sherwood. It's his 4th game this year with double-digit hits. The rest of the NHL has 1 of these games. 1.
And I was certainly wondering about that. Like, if he's going to be turned into a points machine all of a sudden, are you going to forget what got you there in the hits?
And
the answer is no. Apparently no.
And the other thing is he's doing this in different buildings, right? Like, hits can sometimes be a little bit subjective and not exactly calculated as liberally building to building, but whatever. Maybe the stats keeper's the guy who's looking at hits, just his reputation precedes him.
Well, there is a little bit of that with hits.
He's doing it.
Yeah.
And we long have reporters now, the last week or so, been trying to get him to speak more and more about himself. And he's more inclined to talk about it as a collective, including with regards to the line he's on, centered by Elias Pettersson. Here's Sherwood.
You play with world-class players, it's fun. But I think we're just playing the right way. We're taking care of the puck. We're forcing pucks in and getting them back. And then from there, you let their high-end IQ and playmaking take over. But I think it's just a predictability where we're playing north and we're just supporting the puck, and that way, make plays from there.
That's with him, DeBrusk, and Pettersson. And the predictability is big. Tocchet has talked about this a lot, that when you know what one of your line mates is doing, first of all, when you know what he's supposed to do as per your system and the way it's coached, and then you have trust that he's going to do it, and Sherwood seems a most trustworthy line mate here, it allows smart hockey players like Elias Pettersson to read off the play, get to the appropriate spot, and then take advantage, particularly when Sherwood is on the forecheck first and turning pucks over deep, or at the very least making life difficult for the defenseman on the zone exit. It has been an awesome textbook example of what these coaches are trying to coach, how the Vancouver Canucks are trying to play, and Sherwood and his 2 line mates falling in line. And, to quote Belichick, as simple as coaching comes, right? Do your job. They are doing their jobs.
He's under some pressure now, though, assuming, and again, Brock Boeser back at practice, this time in Boston wearing a full contact jersey. Now Sherwood has a little bit of additional fire under his behind here, because if he doesn't look like himself, of this newfound self, if there's any slippage, well, Rick Tocchet's got a great solution. How about you put Brock Boeser with Elias Pettersson and Jake DeBrusk, and all of a sudden you've got a certified top line in the absence of JT Miller.
And I hear you, and I hear that it's a little bit of an awkward fit, Besser with Bluger and Heinen.
Yeah.
Bluger being, one of these things is not like the other. That said, Teddy Bluger has played well. And, of course, we know he works with Joshua and Garland.
I'm surprised they didn't go to that right off the bat.
A little bit as well, but I think he wants to give Bluger some love for the way he's played this season, and he got another goal on Saturday. It's been a bit of a surprising year for Teddy Bluger in that regard. I mean, last year, all those chances, and yet he's doesn't quite have the hands to be an NHL finisher, is not going to put up gaudy point totals by any stretch, but 4 goals, 6 assists, 10 points in 19 games, like that's really good production out of Teddy Bluger, right? I mean, he was Vegas's 5th centerman a couple years ago when they won the Stanley Cup. So from being a guy who's on the fringes of dressing night in, night out
to a 40-point pace,
to a 40-point pace is damn good stuff. So I think a little bit of sugar there for Bluger. And then there's the hit from Quinn Hughes on Josh Norris, apparently a good friend from their USA Hockey days.
Sure.
So he's ejected for boarding, and it's absolutely a penalty. And by the letter of the law, it's a disqualification foul. The referee has no discretion as per Rule 41.5, Blake. A boarding major resulting in an injury to the face or head of an opponent means an automatic game misconduct. When I first saw it, I thought, okay, that's a penalty. Then when I saw it again, I'm like, okay, you may get 5 for that. I didn't realize that it was an automatic ejection if there's an injury to the opposing player. I was struck by your tweets threatening to peace out of the game if, in fact, he was ejected. Did you, in fact, peace out? Did you stop watching the game? You were so disgusted?
I did turn it on. Off, pardon me, but somebody else in the family turned it on.
Right.
2 things on this. A, what is injury?
Check his blue sky skeets.
What is injury on the play? He was back for the power play. He played on the power play, the subsequent power play. So was he injured? And again, it's a penalty. It's unequivocally a penalty.
Yeah.
No one's debating that. But is it an injury? My biggest problem is with the rule, not so much with the refs' legislation of it. Although, again, you could argue, is that injury? Do you need to see a little bit more? Because I don't think there was blood. But blood is a good thing to bring up here because high sticking. If people remember, there was a scourge of high sticking, I don't know, 20 years ago. And they came up at that time with the, okay, well, if you draw blood, automatic, 5 in a game. And then they realized, whoa, that's a little bit too blanket because blood happens with a lot of accidental high sticks. Do we want to punish them so greatly for that? And they walked it back. And they all of a sudden said to the refs, okay, if you're pretty sure there's no malicious intent there, you can give them a double minor for high sticking with blood. And so we broadened the spectrum and allowed the referees more leniency on where to drop it down onto that spectrum. I think this one, and I think there's probably a bunch of them that deserve this, Matt, when it comes to majors. Is there a double minor possibility here when that was a perfect storm? The skates of Norris go into the Mohawk, if you will, position where if people don't play hockey, it's your skates are in. He was about to make a hard pivot, and so he aligns his skates. So effectively, he's easily tipped forward. 1 second before that, 2 seconds after, and his feet are perpendicular to the boards, and he's not so tippable. And it's not much of a bump there from Quinn Hughes. So perfect storm there to some degree. To me, it's either 5 and no game or it's a double minor. Both of those, I think the leniency should be there in the rule.
Yeah, I think there's a good case for making it a discretionary penalty for the referee, in particular given the symmetry that you draw with the high sticking fouls. I also think that it's a lot easier for referees and for the National Hockey League when you do have black and white automatic rules and you get less screaming from one fan base. So I can understand why they have it that way. I'm with you. I would like to see that as a discretionary penalty because I don't think anyone can look at that and say there's malice or intent there.
No.
On Hughes's part. And look, the friendship, you can't adjudicate friendship.
No. In the moment, you're not thinking about that.
I see a lot of that from Canucks fans.
Do you guys know each other?
I saw a lot of that from Canucks fans on Saturday night, photos of them like arm in arm in USA Hockey jerseys and things like that. And all of that is great. And who knows, if it goes to a hearing, maybe you can point to the fact that you got a long-standing relationship with a guy that you fouled on the ice and didn't mean it, use that as evidence. But in the there and now of the officials mitigating that decision, there was no way friendship was, cute as it may be, was going to come into the equation.
About 10 days ago, we had the discussion about Quinn Hughes. Mm-hmm. Could a defenseman win the Lady Byng again? Mm-hmm. There's only been a handful, not even, that have won it. Since we made that declaration, he has gone from 2 penalty minutes. Yeah. In fact, he had 0 in the first day game to 19 penalty minutes.
Yeah, he's done.
And Matt, he's now on pace to obliterate his penalty minute high water mark.
It was his first game misconduct of his career. Yeah, he's done. The Lady Byng candidacy died in Ottawa Saturday night.
His career high was last year at 38 minutes. He's halfway there already at the quarter pole.
Yeah, he's not going in this year.
Yeah.
It's too bad.
Poor use of the word quarter pole, I know.
Incorrect use of the word quarter pole. It's the final quarter, not the first. Like this from our buddy White aren't the stanchion. As we saw, Hronek stepped up huge despite losing Quinn Hughes. Guy was winning pucks, making zone exits, and held the fort down. Evidence that he can anchor his own pair. And the coaches can be a little bit more secure if they want to split him and Hughes up, because they did make a move with Brandstrom. Brandstrom with Myers in the early going before it all, before Hughes was ejected, and the next thing you know, you're mixing and matching the rest of the game. But you tell me, do you watch a game like that from Hronek, and he was awesome, and think to yourself, okay, if we had to and we needed more balance, we could split him and Hughes?
I mean, the truth is, yes, objectively, it proves that. But in a player's mind, the psyche of the player, sometimes they need that adversity. Like, there's only 5 of you for the rest of the game. What are you going to do about it? And everybody elevates. When it's just a Tuesday in Columbus, are you able to elevate like that?
No, I hear you.
And that's what separates the very good from the great. And I think that's what separates a guy like Hronek from a guy like Quinn Hughes. Mm-hmm. But truthfully, is the ability there for Philip Hronek to anchor his own pair? Yes. Mm-hmm. But I don't know that I've got full confidence that it would work on a full-time basis, or that they're willing to even try it on a full-time basis.
Lastly, here on the game, Max Sasson, his first NHL game, and he gets a point and assist on the 2-1 Blucher goal. Dad and family going crazy in the stands. Of course, he let us know last week that Dad shed a tear when he said, "I'm making my NHL debut." Loved the shoulder checking in the post-game interview. He knew his teammates were up to no good, and sure enough, they got him with some shaving cream. A nice start for a college free agent that the Canucks targeted, went after. He believed in his opportunity with the Vancouver Canucks, which is basically what you have to promise these college kids, right? Because oftentimes they're picking from dozens of NHL teams, and they're looking at some of the weaker clubs in the league and saying to themselves, my opportunity is going to be better there. They don't quite have as many centermen or wingers, whatever the case may be. But he signs coming out of Western Michigan, spent 2 years there. He's a Michigander too. He's coming all the way out to the West Coast. He had played his minor hockey in the USHL in places like, in his home state of Muskegon, places like Cedar Rapids and Waterloo. So he had been very much a Midwest U.S. hockey player, and he signs with the Canucks. He comes to Abbotsford. He has that little toe dip the first year. And then last year, as we talked about last week when discussing this recall, he was 42 points in 56 games. And guys like Dave Hall from Canucks Army and others who watch the Abbey Canucks closely talked about how he was a detailed player in all three zones.
As an AHL rookie, those are good numbers.
Those are really good numbers.
Yeah.
I mean, that is 3/4 of a point per game. So
it's a nice skill set. It's a nice tight curl.
Yeah.
There's a pass right onto the tape of Teddy Bluger. Like,
Yeah.
it was nice.
And you've got to hand it to Canucks development here after years and years of having almost nothing to show for your actual in-house development. And I know some people want to say, well, what about Pettersson, Hughes? Again, those guys didn't develop by the Vancouver Canucks. They showed up as ready-made NHL
stars. Yes.
Development's a little bit different. Nils Hoglander was a development success story. More on him in a second for the Vancouver Canucks. Thatcher Demco in goal. Every goalie's going to have to develop, right? And there's not many goalies who are ready-made. But when you take a look at the Canucks lineup, the one thing that it continues to be short on is players who grew up, developed in this organization, graduated to the National Hockey League, and became fixtures. You're starting to see more signs of this. Okay, Lekramaki, Baines, they haven't stuck, but they've played NHL games and are going to get opportunities again. Sasson here plays an NHL game. I suspect we'll get more opportunities here.
Put Klimovich on that list.
Klimovich is absolutely coming. Elias Pettersson, the defenseman, got a recall last week. Okay, didn't play a game, but we'll see. Hearing great things about Cole McWard. I suspect you're going to hear those names in the NHL lineup.
I'm even tempted to give them a little bit of credit on Ratu Ratu because they get him at such a young age.
No, for sure. They get credit for Ratu.
Yeah.
Yes. No, they do. I mean, it's been a year and a half. It's been almost 2 years, Blake, since he's been in the Canucks. So, yes, you get credit for Ratu as well. Okay. Sasson. So if Besser is good to go, who are we scratching here, Mr. Price? Because Sasson would be the easy one. Kid coming off a point in his first NHL game. Ratu, where you slide Sasson over and he plays center ice? No. Okay. Then that leaves us to contemplate Nils Hoglander. And it was another night, and I mean, it was a fiery night. He gets into a fight late in this hockey game, but just 8 minutes and 38 seconds, 3 penalties on the night for Nils Hoglander, 1 shot attempt on this night, with really not a whole lot going on with Nils Hoglander. And look, we know Tocchet has been tough on Hoglander. We know that Hoglander isn't exactly the apple of his eye. But the other thing that we know is that if the Vancouver Canucks are going to make a trade for a top 4 NHL defenseman, if not 2, which they may well require between now and the trade deadline, Nils Hoglander is probably going to be one of the pieces you dangle to opposing teams as a young winger who's already got a 20-goal season on his resume. You cannot devalue the asset to a large degree here, Blake. What do you think? Is he a healthy scratch candidate tomorrow in Boston?
He is, and additionally for this reason, it's back-to-back games here for the Vancouver Canucks. And with that in mind, cattle prodding a player with a healthy scratch, but then putting him back in the lineup 23 hours later, I think is a way to where you can healthy scratch in a really healthy way. You're not playing tonight. You don't even tell me you're playing tomorrow night. But you bottle the anger a little bit, you bottle the indignation, and you let the guy let it out the very next night. So, and that'll go for anybody that gets the healthy scratch tomorrow night. But obviously for the veteran player, it stings just a little bit more. So I think it's a possibility. I really do think it's a possibility. But I think he would most likely, win or lose, get right back in there the following night. Because the AHL guys that are going to be in the lineup instead of him, you don't need them even in a win to play back-to-back nights.
You poo-pooed me on Sasson playing center. Wednesday, and I know Malkin has played some with Crosby this year. But let's say for a second that you're considering scratching Ratu and playing Sasson at center. You think there's no chance of that?
I think it's very little chance of that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you not look at your center matchups over the next couple of nights? Like Crosby Malkin, versus Lindholm Coyle, if you get Sasson caught out against the wrong line. I'm just putting that out there.
I mean,
I think you're probably better off if you plan to use the young man at center in Boston than in Pittsburgh. The other thing that, because it's a back-to-back, you might be able to soften the blow with Höglander. You play him against Boston, and if he has another stinker, you sit him against Pittsburgh, and then you can chalk it up to back-to-back.
Yeah.
Fresh legs.
Yeah, either direction. But I don't think Sasson in Game 2 or Game 3 of his NHL career, they give him the additional workload of playing center. I think they most likely keep things relatively simple. Ratu has had doses of center before this season, of course. And
they're both natural centermen.
Yeah. No,
I mean, Ratu played 825, Blake. It's not like he
for sure.
And he was 50% in the dot.
But he's a face-off specialist
yeah.
now, so he's a helpful player. He's a helpful arrow to have in the quiver. So I would be surprised at that.
What are our friends at Yellow Dog and Neighborhood up to?
Well, it's the month of November still for at least a few more days. So that means you still have a chance to get the Chase My Tail 4-pack at a special deal at your favorite government or private liquor stores. The Chase My Tail Pale Ale from Yellow Dog.
A few things here from Jay Fresh Hockey. I love that he publishes these every Sunday. Team defense for the Vancouver Canucks. Remember earlier in the year, we were talking pretty sloppy, like not covering the net, not together. Tocchet was messaging this. Like they're third in expected goals allowed. 2.09. That's pretty good. That's their hallmark, too. I mean, you take a look at everything that transpired for the Vancouver Canucks last season. The individual improvements of Hughes and Besser and Miller and Pettersson and Roenick joining the lineup and more depth and some of the role players they brought in and all of that, yeah, absolutely, was part of the formula as to how they turned it around so magnificently. But team defense was the calling card. Playing 5-man defensive hockey in front of your goaltender and making life a whole lot easier for the goaltenders than it was previously. I mean, there were very few days last year where Thatcher Demco was under the sort of fire that he was in previous years. So that's a terrific stat to see. I'm sure Tocchet, Foote, and the coaching staff feel a lot better about the way this team is playing the defensive side of the puck as 5-man units than earlier in the season. Then we look to the offensive side of things. They're 6th in goals above expected at plus 11.1. So the shooting percentage again is 11.6 as a team. And then 5-on-5 expected goals per 60, 2.29. That's just 16th middle of the pack in the league. Full disclosure, they've missing Besser for 2 weeks. That's going to have an effect, right? And now missing Miller a little bit.
In terms of goals scored above expected, though, remember, this seems to be a coach who has preached quality of shot over quantity. So, and we're seeing this. I've seen this with the departed Vanni Sartini in soccer too. This is becoming more of a thing, and yet it's funny. Originally, when we started to collect advanced stats, remember that seemed to be the thing. You just take shots because it's just law of averages. Even if you have a low shooting percentage, if you just have more shots, you're still going to score more goals. Well, there's starting to be a different school of thought on that. You take shots from where you think you can score from. Yeah. Where the statistics tell you you're more likely to score from. That's where you shoot from. And the Canucks are buying into that.
The throw pucks on net,
it's dying.
11.6 team shooting percentage, ranks 8th in the National Hockey League right now.
Yeah.
Capitals lead at 14%.
And a lot of people would be like, why wouldn't you shoot more? You get more. Well,
fair enough.
It's from where, though?
No, that's what makes it a great debate, because you can't score if you don't shoot. And there were times, particularly in the playoffs last year, where I was like, this is just not enough. You've got to give yourself more opportunities, for a bounce, a deflection,
Well,
a
adherence,
rebound.
adherence
the
to any
sorts of
dogma.
things that sort of coaching tree believes in, right? Rod Brindamore believes in that. They shoot from freaking everywhere. And you're right. Tocchet is, and he preached coming into this year that they were going to do some system changes. They were going to try and generate more off the rush, but the rush does not necessarily mean more shots on goal. He did a couple of times message more shots on goal, but I never felt his heart was into it. And, through nearly 20 games here, I think we're seeing a similar pattern play out. We'll see what it's like when Miller's back, when Besser's back. This could change some, because let's face it, those guys are two of your best offensive players, right? And they're guys who maybe you do want shooting.
Adherence to any dogma too much is a bad thing. The Edmonton Oilers beat the Canucks in that series because of shots from distance, from shots from places you don't normally score from, right? So,
and granted that because there was a young goaltender who was not yet accustomed to how good NHL shots from distance are in comparison to the American Hockey
League. But it's also a playoff thing.
And Latvia.
How many clean shoots and score goals do you see in the playoffs? It diminishes. And one other place where that has been a boon to the Canucks is this shooting happy Quinn Hughes. The reason why we've seen Quinn Hughes' offense explode more is he's committed to shooting and shooting from the point, and it is working. So, but not everybody needs to join in that cavalcade. Let's leave it to the elite players, maybe, or leave it to situational. Oh, it's a young goalie; he doesn't see through traffic. Let's try it here. It doesn't need to be each and every night, right? So, hey, it was fun last year with all the goals scored.
Yep.
But this is maybe more of a sustainable attack.
We'll speak to Darren Dreger later in the program here, who brings us some news on Thatcher Demco, and the expectation is that he is going to start a game at the end of this road trip, Blake. There is a school of thought that because you haven't seen this guy play, A, since April last year, but B, with this new popliteus injury that may well require some post-game treatment, that you are better off starting him at home, or that starts on the road may be a little bit more difficult because of your capacity in post-game treatment. So it doesn't sound like Boston, Pittsburgh, or Buffalo for Demco right now. A reminder, this is a 6-game trip which continues into the weekend. A Sunday 9:30 a.m. start for us, everybody, in Detroit, and then Tuesday in Minnesota.
Which, as you bring up that 9:30 a.m. Pacific, which is 12:30 local time, Matt, and they are done that game at 3 p.m.
Right.
Why? Maybe you don't have to dart to Minnesota immediately. Maybe you have a 7 p.m. flight. Wow. And you allow everybody to just relax after the game and rehab whatever they need rehabbed. So do you start Thatcher Demco there?
And the other thing there, Blake, is if you start him there, it gives you the capacity to play 3 goaltenders over what is a very busy 4-game stretch.
It's true.
It's 4 games in 5.5 days because of that early start. And I don't think you want to subject them to Minnesota on the Tuesday, the final game of the trip. 1, the Wild are pretty darn good.
They score a lot of goals.
2, the backtracking in those final games can often be the most difficult games to win.
You jump a time zone there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I just wonder whether that is absolutely the best spot there for a Thatcher Demco start, or, the Buffalo game on Friday, Blake. That's another one, because you could play Lankinen, Shelovs in whatever combination you want in Pittsburgh and Boston, or Boston and Pittsburgh, and then come back with a fresh goaltender Friday in Buffalo. So,
and almost no travel there. Like people say, you get all stiff getting onto a plane.
Pittsburgh to Buffalo is like up and down.
Well, Buffalo to Detroit
is up and down.
Up and down.
Uh-huh.
So,
yeah.
Options.
Yeah. So Dreg's coming up, as well as J-Pat, a hooded J-Pat. That's our menu today. It's brought to you by Greta. Great spot for all the games home and away. It will become clear when you see Jeff. We'll be there for Canucks Army viewing parties throughout the season. We're minutes from the arena. steps from the stadium, before game, after the game, street food menu, arcade. It's all happening at Greta. Weekly drink specials, the place to be, 50 West Cordova. Greta Bar, let the games begin.
We've got a beefy final segment as well, so stick around for that as well.
Well, on Vanni Sartini and the firing of the Whitecaps head coach. And I got to say, this one comes as a really big surprise. And so when you surprise your locals with moves, you've got to wonder. The Caps have they've made their bet here. And we'll discuss it in the final segment, indeed. Bet365 Bets of the Day, the segment brought to you by Bet365, proud partner, Caterson Price. Where are you headed?
Looking at the Monday Nighter and the Baltimore Ravens at just a 2.5-point favorite. And I think I can deal with that on the road.
Oh, can you?
Yes. I think I can deal with that.
It's the battle of the Harbaughs.
Yeah.
And as much as I like
Harball,
as much as I like John, you know who my guy is. Jim. He's got the Chargers going 4 in a row. They have never hosted a playoff game since moving from San Diego to Los Angeles. They can move into home field position with a victory here. Give me the LA Chargers to gobble turkey a few days before Thanksgiving at plus 125 over Brother John. And to answer the question, who's got it better than John Harbaugh? Jim Harbaugh. That's who. On your Bet365.
2 7-win teams on Monday night. Please don't disappoint us from an entertainment standpoint.
Exactly.
Please give us a good football game.
This one's delicious, right? We sometimes look at some of these late season primetime games because the schedule is set at the beginning of the year. They actually flexed a Thursday night game for the first time ever, huh? But, these matchups are set before the season based on who we think is going to be good. This one has got it right to this part of the schedule. So very much looking forward to the Hard Bowl on Monday Night Football. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the moment, it's never ordinary. Bet365, use code NATION when opening that account. Jeff Patterson coming up next.
I'll be honest, I don't get to many games anymore, whether it be at the arena or the stadium. Ticket availability cost, it's a bit of an issue these days. So I prefer to go where there's atmosphere and I know I can get in. Greta Bar YVR. Soak up all the atmosphere with your fellow fans and enjoy a great night with a great street food menu. I prefer the poutine. Weekly drink specials as well at Greta Bar YVR at 50 West Cordova. And we'll be having our viewing parties there all season long as well. Your pregame, your postgame, it's at Greta Bar YVR, 50 West Cordova. Let the games begin.
Caterson Price from the historic Wall Center. This next segment brought to you by Ben Moss. Ben Moss with a history. Canadian-owned, operated with a history dating back more than a century. There are 5 locations here in British Columbia. Willowbrook, in Langley, Coquitlam Center. They are committed to customer satisfaction. You should check out the large selection of Canadian mined diamonds, lab-grown diamonds. They've got diamonds with payment plans to suit your needs. For more information, check out benmoss.com. Ben Moss, for the love of jewelry. Here's Jeff Patterson, our Canucks reporter, and, of course, the host of RinkWide Vancouver. They're busy at it Saturday, although at a reasonably early hour after the Eastern start.
Home for dinner.
Ottawa. Absolutely. Hi, Jeff.
Yeah, and they're getting earlier on this trip with a noon start and a 9:30 start coming up on the weekend. So, favorable. You're right. Home in plenty of time, see the family, and get a good night's rest. And I'm sure those 5 defenders that were forced to carry the load in the absence of Quinn Hughes probably needed a good night's rest as well. Credit to them. And I know we're going to talk a fair bit about what went on in the nation's capital on Saturday. Can we just start, though, with the keep away in the third period? The delayed penalty. Incredible. Look, we've all been around the game for a long time. I've seen teams do that to some degree, but almost
to some degree.
Full minutes. Spectacular stuff. And then, as somebody pointed out in my timeline, and I thought it was a great point, what happened to the Sens at the end? They ran out of time. Could they not have benefited from a few more minutes with the puck when they're trying to press for the equalizer? But They should have tried a little harder to get the puck there when the referee's arm was in the air. That was just a wild sequence.
And we see it in every other sport, guys. We see it in every other sport.
Run out the clock.
When you're in football, you use up every second of the play clock if you're leading with the ball.
Absolutely.
It makes so much sense.
Yeah, and last time we saw keep away with that, like Henrik and Daniel were here in Vancouver, right? They were effective at keep away. Apologies to our audio listeners, our podcast listeners for a second, but Jeff, that's some hoodie. Is that a Rick Tocchet fleece
no, it's Canucks Army issued. You can see the fine logo right there.
Yeah.
It's comfortable, but I will say there's just a little too much hood in the hoodie here. Yeah.
Can we get hood up for a second and see just how much?
There's a lot there.
Oh, boy.
Excess.
Yeah. That Obi-Wan. Will,
Obi-Wan.
Envelop.
Yes.
Jeff.
Yeah. Very solid coverage.
Yes.
You could wear it with your hockey helmet on.
That's true.
If you choose. It'd be good for Tocchet. You should get Tocchet one. That would work well.
If you have any outdoor games to cover, Jeff, that's the hoodie you want, my dude.
We have Canuck practice to cover. We'll get to that in a second. Let's finish up in Ottawa. The fact that they were able to overcome, and we felt like the reserves were, or the cavalry was coming, and it looks like that might be the case for Brock Boeser sometime in the next couple games, if not tomorrow. But that was just a nice, gut win. They found a way.
Yeah, and I was getting tired of saying, hey, Jake DeBrusk has to rise up here at some point. So great to see him get a pair of that line right now. Like, they are grooving. And does it make a ton of sense? I mean, on some levels, I suppose, but Kiefer Sherwood was not brought in to be one of the goal-scoring leaders on the Vancouver Canucks, and yet here he is through 19 games. This guy really has done it all, and it's not coming at the expense of what's made him successful. He had 10 more hits the other night in Ottawa, his fourth 10-plus hit game of the season. Like, it really is remarkable. And so they needed somebody to step up. Another sort of quiet but effective performance from Elias Pettersson. 2 more assists there. So of those 3, though, DeBrusk needed that kind of night against his old buddy Linus Ullmark too. So that probably made it just a little bit sweeter. And then credit to the 5D that did have to hold down the fort. And I thought it was fascinating, guys. And we may never fully know, but the opening lineup, it's Brandstrom and Myers who start the game together. For all the howls in this market about switching and getting away from Ceci and Myers, I think they played 3 shifts together before Quinn got turfed, and then basically it's all hands on deck. And Philip Hronek becomes your ice time leader, and he was terrific the other night in all situations. I thought Hronek's best work, though, was on the Quinn Hughes penalty kill there. Logged 3 minutes and 5 seconds of the 5-minute major. And that was a big kill for the Canucks. Opportunity missed, obviously, for the Sens. There were a few of those as the night went along before they started to implode. But I think that's a tough circumstance, obviously, when your captain, your leader, your ice time guy that you're just leaning on every night, he gets thrown out of a hockey game that early. And so, the kind of start the Canucks needed out on the road trip, set the tone here, put those 2 points in the bank, move on to Boston now. And we've said that there are some gettable games here along the way. So, just a nice jumping on point, and the fact that they may get some reinforcements as they move through this road trip as well. So, a lot to like in the 4-3 victory. Would have liked to have seen it through at 4-1 or even 4-2, but whatever. A win's a win, and move on to Boston.
I've been thinking about DeBrusk, and if in fact this is him, Jeff, and all the intel from Boston was that he's a streaky scorer, boy, you're really going to need him to be on a hot streak in the playoffs, huh? And if you go through an extended playoffs, and I know I'm getting way ahead of myself, but, if we are looking forward to what this team needs to do to get past the Oilers and past the second round, if you're in extended playoffs, it's going to need to be a long hot streak as well. Talk to me about the streakiness. Talk to me whether or not you think he can be everything he needs to be for Pettersson and this hockey club if they're going to go deeper in the postseason.
Yeah, look, I get it. I've heard that a lot, too, that this is Jake DeBrusk. Well, okay, if you're streaky, I suppose that means it does cut both ways and that you'll have some dry spells, but then when the going's good, that's when you feast. Now, he scored in 3 straight on the California road trip, then went the entire 6-game homestand where, quite frankly, I thought he was just a little too quiet, even as they put that line together with Pettersson and Sherwood scoring the goals, and maybe that's because Petey was putting the puck on his stick as opposed to DeBrusk's. Whatever the case, power play goal, his first as a Canuck, standing his ground in front of the net. You want to see some of that. And I don't know how many opportunities he's going to get. If Besser comes back, somebody's going to get bumped off that top unit. We've already seen that he's been demoted from the first unit power play earlier in the season. So I'm not totally sure where things stand with Jake DeBrusk on power play 1. But to his credit, was given the opportunity, made the most of it. And then the second goal shows nice hands in tight. And we also saw a nice goal in Los Angeles where he was at the side of the net, showed some patience, waited the goaltender out, and then tucked it in. All the credit in the world, though, to Kiefer Sherwood. Picks up that puck in the neutral zone, draws the defenders to him, and then feathers the pass to DeBrusk, who is on the business end there. So going back to Boston, I'm sure we know that he's an excitable guy. You have to know that this was probably the game of the 82 when the schedule came out that he looked at first and foremost. And so maybe he's getting revved up for the return to Boston. Who knows? I will say this, that a week ago, the Bruins were reeling, and obviously it's not been a great start for them. But since the coaching change, they've given up 1 goal in 2 games. So I don't know if anybody's going to be feeling it against the Boston Bruins. Look like they're clamping down and trying to tighten up defensively, so that'll make the challenge there a little bit greater. But yeah, I mean, look, there were a lot of suggestions that 20 to 25 goals for DeBrusk, but really the payoff would come, as you said, Matt, come playoff time. There's no way to know that truly until you get there, but that is where he has played some of his best hockey in the National Hockey League.
Well, and I was going to say, in fairness, the last 3 playoffs have been very good for Jake DeBrusk. 21 points in 27 games combined. It's the previous 2 where it's 7 points in 23 games. So right there, even in his playoff numbers, you see the streakiness. We're asking on our Surrey Mitsubishi poll question, is Kiefer Sherwood the long-lost winger for Elias Pettersson? And there's part of me that can't believe that, Jeff, as a guy who was a late-blooming bottom 6 guy in Nashville. But you tell me, like, is he long for this line? Can't take him off right now. Do you think this season is going to do you think Kiefer Sherwood is going to be on that line long term?
Does he just work with them?
Yeah, I still don't know that he's the long-term answer here as you're trying to build a team that wants to contend. That said, I mean, he has checked every box for the Vancouver Canucks and checked everything else for that matter that's been in his way this season. The 19 games, like, honestly, guys, if I'm sitting here, and I am, talking to you and trying to come up with a first quarter MVP for the Vancouver Canucks, I think it's Quinn Hughes by default. But how quickly do you move to Kiefer Sherwood in the discussion? Miller's not available. Besser's been out. Petey's struggled. Garland got off to this terrific start and has leveled off. The level's still relatively high. But honestly, like, I think Kiefer Sherwood's name, and Kevin Lankinen's probably in that discussion as well, but I don't know that you go much deeper than 3 or 4. And who would have thought that on July 1st? Like, this is a guy that, they liked him because he was hard to play against in the playoffs. He's going to bring some edge and a little bit of grit. This guy's part of it. He's got a share of the team lead in goals. He leads the team in 5-on-5 offense here as we go. Leading a runaway leader. Like, he just keeps extending his lead atop the league in hits. And, hasn't taken a night off, hasn't taken a shift off. So he's earned the opportunity here. But I still think, if Besser's back and Miller's back, is Pia Suter in your top 6? Where does Jake DeBrusk ultimately fit best? Does Connor Garland deserve more of an opportunity to play higher in the lineup? And I'll just say this, that through all of this, as Sherwood sort of emerged as this physical force, I kept thinking to myself, I can't wait till Dakota Joshua gets back. Sherwood on one side, Joshua on the other. I don't really care who's in the middle, but I think that would be a ton of fun to watch and probably not too much fun to play against, to have those 2 guys getting in on the forecheck. I still think at some point, if the Canucks have full health and have these options available to the coaching staff, that's something. I just kind of feels like a Rick Tocchet sort of deployment, doesn't it? Sherwood and Joshua together, kind of heat-seeking missiles getting in on the forecheck.
Do you think, because you referenced it there a moment ago, where do you think Besser fits when he comes back here? Like, you're not bumping Sherwood for Besser here.
Well, we've seen it at practice already today, and people are wondering, is Kiefer Sherwood a first-line winger right now? Well, I've got more shocking news based on practice today. Is Teddy Bluger a second-line center right now? Because that's who Besser is with at practice. It's Teddy Bluger and Danton Heinen. Not willing is Rick Tocchet, I guess, to break up the Suter with Garland and Dakota Joshua.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of the challenge for a coach is you've got a couple of pieces that are working for you, so you cling to those, and then you slot others in. And like Brock's a veteran now. Earlier in his career, I might say, hey, it'll take him a little while to get back up to speed. I think he recognizes the situation this team's in and what he means to the hockey club. So if he gets clearance, he's going to be in there and he'll be looking to do Brock Boeser things. And part of me thinks Besser was eyeing that game in Pittsburgh with all the success that he's had over the years against various Penguins goaltending. He's like, I got to get back in for that one. Feast on the Penguins when the getting's good. But there is the matter of Boston first, and he's got to get through that game healthy and unscathed. So, yeah, I mean, lots of moving parts here. Obviously, you take JT Miller out of your equation, and that changes the conversation on so many levels about how you try and trot things out. We saw against the Rangers, like Rick Tocchet tried to build 2 legitimate NHL top 6 lines and then kind of worry about the rest there. Had the effort, didn't get the result against the New York Rangers, but did get the result the other night against the Ottawa Senators. So, if Besser has to take a bit of a step back, perhaps, if that's how we're looking at this for a game, just to kind of find his way back in the lineup, so be it. He'll be on the first unit power play. We'll know that, and hopefully that this hasn't affected his hands, because I think we kind of forget, like, Brock was off to a terrific start. He had 6 goals in a dozen games, and you just hope that this doesn't throw him for any kind of loop.
We talked about it Friday. He was right on pace for 40 goals and 70 points and following up that fantastic career year, so good on him. I know you mentioned the Branstrom Myers business there before Hughes was lost to the match penalty. Roenick, though, without Hughes over the course of the game, I think was a pretty good story. Does that does that maybe give you more evidence that, okay, if you needed to, Philip Roenick could anchor his own pair if you want to continue mixing things up?
Yeah, look, we've talked about that for so long in this market. It was the Senators, so context matters. There are better opponents, but on a night like the other night, pressed into duty, circumstances called that Philip Roenick stepped up. A season high for him in ice time, 27 and a half minutes. I think it was the 3rd highest that he's ever played as a member of the Vancouver Canucks. So, pushing the limits a little bit, but he was terrific. He was on for all 4 of the Canuck goals, 3 of them at even strength, doesn't get scored on at evens. Well, the Sens didn't score at evens. So, again, at 5-on-5, that's what you want. Like, that's the Philip Roenick. So, yes, I think, sort of a small why, yes, that it has to give the coaching staff something. And in the same breath, and we talked about it a moment ago, like, it looked like they were going to split Ceci and Myers to begin with. Then they had no choice. Myers and Ceci played one shift, 21 seconds together at 5-on-5 the other night. And the results sort of speak for themselves, that Myers and Branstrom were good. I thought Ceci and Juleson, they were the most common pair for Ceci. Not perfect. I don't think anybody would expect that it was going to be perfect. But there were some signs there that, yes, maybe this is something. And, of course, you can always juice your lineup. Like, if you split Hughes and Hronek in game, you can always put them together if you're down a goal and need some offense or the situation calls. But in the short term here, just to sort of solidify and stabilize, I do think that maybe it is time to take a look at Philip Hronek. And then it begs the question, like, who's best to play with Quinn Hughes, right? Are we talking about Tyler Myers and Hughes? Is there a huge appetite in the market to see that over the long haul? But these are the options that they've got. And so they have to figure it out. Hopefully Derek Forbort comes back. We talked the other day that not the savior, but just another piece in the equation here as they try to find sort of that optimal 6 and the best deployment to move forward with.
Is Quinn Hughes a liability penalty-wise now? He went from Lady Byng contender in the first 10 games. Is he just too undisciplined out there?
We're being told we jinxed his Lady Byng candidacy, talking about how he needs more credit for that award earlier.
I just think he thought, look, I lead this team in so many other ways. I'm going to lead in penalty minutes too. I'll show you. It's funny because it had to be penalized. Like, it was a penalty. I think by the letter of the law, it's a penalty any way you look at it. And, of course, Canuck fans screaming bloody murder. And how could you do that to poor little Quinn? He doesn't play like that. And it was his buddy Josh Norris, too. But it's a penalty. And then the rulebook says if there's injury to the face or head, then it escalates to major in a game misconduct. It's unfortunate. I didn't have a huge problem with it being a 5-minute penalty. It's a dangerous play. It's face first onto the dasher. It's not malicious because Quinn doesn't play that way, but I do think if the tables were turned, can you imagine the howls of outrage from Canuck Nation if Quinn Hughes is on the receiving end of that kind of treatment? So I do think you have to step back and sort of try and see it through a neutral lens that it was a penalty all day, every day. Again, no supplemental discipline. It certainly didn't rise to that level, and that's enough of a punishment to lose Quinn Hughes 5 minutes into a hockey game and have to play the rest of the way without your best player and your captain. So he'll pick up. I wrote about this at Canucks Army. I mean, if there is a silver lining in this, to some degree, guys, they're playing 4 games in 5.5 nights here, starting in Boston, Pittsburgh, the early start in Buffalo, and the early start on Sunday. By the time they finish in Detroit, it really is 4 games in 5.5. Like, Canucks played against the Rangers Tuesday, Ottawa Saturday. Quinn plays 5 shifts. They win the hockey game. Quinn gets to rest up for the remainder of this road trip. I'm scratching maybe a little bit for a silver lining, but to some degree, you don't get many true nights off when you're completely healthy in the National Hockey League. So Quinn got to put his feet up. Team went about its business, and he'll be motivated to get back in there and do all the great things that he does for the Vancouver Canucks.
Well, I mean, a couple of things. As Blake noted in the opening block, there's discretion on the high sticking penalty now. It used to be drawing blood and whatnot. You sort of wonder whether there can be discretion on this play as well, like what distinguishes
a wider spectrum.
Yeah.
To choose from.
What distinguishes them. And then the other thing we were talking about, Jeff, is there's a lot of Canucks fans spread across this country. Imagine you're spending big coin to attend that game in Ottawa as a Canucks fan, and you don't get to see Quinn Hughes
for sure
play in it. That's really too bad.
And just quickly, I'm with you in terms of the latitude of the officials. This one seemed black and white, but 5 minutes, but keep the captain
him in the game. No, exactly. Like a 5-minute penalty, would that not have been enough?
It would seem reasonable.
Lastly, got to ask you about the kid in his first NHL game. What'd you make of Max Sasson?
Love the play to set up Teddy Bluger. A little spin move there, showed some patience, protects the puck, and then does what Bluger said he was calling for it. I assume that he knew that was a new teammate. Just screaming. Can't remember
assuming,
what his name is.
Yes.
another guy from Abbotsford. You pass me the puck. He did, and put it in a position, and loved the family reaction. Loved the story on Friday when Max talked about the phone call to his dad, and it really is not just the player. It takes a village, and so for him to share sort of the dad's reaction and crying when he got the phone call, I've got all day for those stories. They never get old. Didn't play a ton. That fourth line didn't play an awful lot, but in the moments that he did play, certainly didn't look like the moment was too big for him. And I did love the Tyler Myers read and reaction to jump that play, intercept the puck, and move it up to Sasson on the right side, and then Sasson puts it in the wheelhouse for Teddy Bluger. So there was a lot to like on that line. We'll see if Besser comes back. Somebody comes out of the lineup. Is it as simple as Max Sasson, or is it getting close to Höglander time to come out of the lineup? 8.5 minutes, a new season low, nothing doing, 2 penalties or 3 penalties. I didn't have a problem with the penalty sticking up for himself on the Stutzla thing, because at that point it looked like the Senators had completely abandoned the hockey game, and the puck was secondary and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't like this, especially after Hughes gets turfed, to see Stutzla take a run at Höglander. But Höglander's there to do a whole lot more, obviously, than he has done. 15 games now without a goal, and we've just seen this too often throughout his career. When we talked about DeBrusk being streaky, I guess the same sort of applies here to Nils Hoglander, but 8.5 minutes of ice time.
And
where does it go from here?
Yeah, well, because the other consideration here, Jeff, is do you have to maintain trade value here if you think he's the asset that gets you that top 4?
Because remember, guys, he has a new contract that hasn't started yet. They need to protect the assets.
But they also,
tricky.
No Miller, no Besser the other night. Kiefer Sherwood's on power play 1. They basically rolled out that first line. And Archdeep Baines was on the second power play unit. These are all signs. People are like, oh, stop it with the Höglander talk. No, the surest indication of what a coach thinks of a player is the way that he uses them. And Rick Tocchet's not using Nils Höglander much.
Yeah, and to healthy scratch him with Miller out of the lineup would be somewhat of an indictment with, to play Sasson or Baines. Anyways, we'll see where that goes tomorrow. Great stuff, Jeff. We won't be talking to you on Friday because of the early start in Buffalo, and you'll be preparing for RinkWide. We've got a bit of a different show that day. Anyway, so you have a wonderful week. Okay, enjoy U.S. Thanksgiving, and we'll catch up next Monday.
I'm going back into hiding now.
Into the hoodie. Yes, retreat. He looks like a druid.
If you are struggling with things like managing stress, anxiety, relationships, or divorce, reach out to the counselors at Advanced Counseling. Book your free initial consultation today at advancedcounseling.ca.
Sick Harrison Price from the Historic Wall Center.
And the culinary team at White Spot wants to remind you, if you just need that little extra something to get you through the day, the comfort menu is there for you. It's almost like therapy, really. You go to White Spot, you saddle up to some mini Yorkies, a braised beef burger, pot roast chicken, pot pie, and you just know everything's going to be okay. If you have a tough day at work with a coworker that, just gets on your last nerve and you just need that warm embrace, it's the comfort menu at White Spot. Visit your local White Spot today.
I'm sure that has never happened to Darren Dreger of TSN and the Ray and Dregs hockey podcast, right? You've never had a coworker get on your last nerve.
No, never. At least not in the last hour, but I'm obviously working from home in studio for the lone game of the night on Sunday night with Utah and Toronto, and I'm there with Cheryl, and I'm there with the O-Dog, and I'm there with James Duthie, and on occasion the wires will touch. I won't identify with whom, but they do occasionally.
I'm guessing it wasn't Cheryl.
No.
Yeah, exactly. Utah had to walk to the rink. How about that?
I mean, the whole thing is absurd, right? Like, number one is if the travel people for the Utah Hockey Club didn't know that the Santa Claus parade was happening in downtown Toronto.
What happened?
Yeah, I mean, you guys know. I mean, clubs, especially the support staff, share information all the time. I mean, try and play the New York Rangers in Madison Square Garden without knowing what you're getting into in Manhattan. So the people of the New York Rangers would share that with any of the visitors. Likewise in Toronto. So I don't know. I don't know if the bus driver got lost or what happened and ran.
But also, why aren't they staying at the Delta right across the street from the rink?
I mean, it was like, I don't know where they stayed. No, I think they were at the Ritz, Blake. So that's probably, that's a few blocks. But anyway, the whole thing.
In the world.
Yeah.
We're no longer desert dogs.
It was much ado about nothing. I mean, they maybe walked 3-4 blocks, and they weren't complaining. They had a good time with it, so all is well.
Yeah. A lot of walking to the rink this weekend. Poor kid in Minnesota as well.
No kidding.
Defense trade market drags. We've talked about this over the season. It is heating up here a little bit, and a new name has emerged, although I guess a new old name, given that the New York Rangers were hoping to trade Jacob Trouba and his no-trade clause previously, but now are intent on making some moves after a bad loss in Edmonton. What can you tell us about the Trouba situation?
Well, and what's bizarre about it is Chris Kreider reportedly also involved in this, and Chris Drury, the general manager for the New York Rangers, has a boatload of expiring contracts that he's going to have to address. Well, those two guys aren't among those, so he's clearly trying to do some work publicly, even though I'm sure he would never admit that. This isn't our first pass with Jacob Trouba. I remember reporting on this at the draft, and how Trouba had dug in at that point for family reasons. His wife is becoming a doctor, and she's in a residency. So there's good reason there with this young family to dig in and want to stay in New York. That still applies. Nothing has changed for Jacob Trouba. So he does have a no-trade clause, and I believe he had to submit a number of teams. But look, any teams with interest in Jacob Trouba would call the agent and say, all right, well, where's his headspace here? And chances are the message going back is, you know what? He's not interested in being traded in season. If you want to revisit this scenario in the summer, well, that's a completely different scenario. And I think his interest is in going to the Western Conference, but not in season now with the New York Rangers. And I feel like that applies to Kreider as well. They had no move clauses that shifted over to the no trade. And I think Kreider had to submit a list in July of 15 teams that he wouldn't go to. So Chris Drury is somehow, some way getting word out there through a myriad of different ways, because I think there were emails sent to other general managers that those two experienced guys are in play, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be traded.
Before Canuck fans get too excited, though, about the possibility of a Trouba, and I know Trouba's got his detractors as well in every market, but that's a team that's not flushing the season. That's a team that is trying to change the chemistry, I think, of the team, aren't they, Darren? That's a significant player that needs to go back for Trouba, no?
Yeah, for sure. And it feels a little bit knee-jerk to me, just the possibility. I look at Chris Kreider, and is he the player that he once was? Well, probably not. And likewise for Jacob Trouba. But they're still both impactful players. Kreider, as a speedy winger, I think a lot of teams could envision how he might be of some use and could help them out. But what are you getting, back to your point, Blake? The New York Rangers they're supposed to be and should be, and I still think they are a top contending team in the Eastern Conference. What it shows us, in their loss to Edmonton, is the parity that exists around the National Hockey League. It was just a game or two ago, we were talking about the floundering Edmonton Oilers, the dysfunction of the Edmonton Oilers, and then they beat the Rangers. And now we're talking about the New York Rangers and Chris Drury wanting to unload two significant assets. So I think it's where we're at in the calendar. Teams have surpassed the 20-point plateau, the quarter mark of the season. U.S. Thanksgiving is right around the corner, and you've got desperation. And some of that desperation comes from ownership, and that most definitely applies to the Dolans in New York, who are in charge of the New York Rangers. So a lot of this could be just simply lighting a fire to get that team going in New York.
Both Trouba and Kreider with 15-team no-trade lists submitted prior to the season. Darren, the Montreal Canadiens are the worst team in the East by standings points, the second worst by points percentage, and they got a couple of defensemen there, and Michael Matheson and David Savard. What do you know, and what do you think we're talking acquisition costs there?
Well, it's a good question. It wouldn't be light, because those two veteran defense in Montreal are important to the process of the Montreal Canadiens. We, again, look at the prospect pool, and that includes NHL prospects who are playing in the National Hockey League on that blue line, and you see promise, but they need to be insulated, right? And Matheson and Savard do exactly that. They provide quality minutes for Marty St. Louis, but also, again, are trying to teach the younger generation what you need to be, as consistent as you need to be an influential NHL D-man. And so that doesn't mean what I'm building a case for is why these players shouldn't be traded, but then you have to look at where the Montreal Canadiens are. And it isn't about 24-25. It's about 25-26. And they're not doing very well. They've got good games, but they've had more bad than they've had good. And there's a ton of pressure on the organization because the fan base in Montreal is tired of the same old dance. So they do have to improve for next year. So Quinn Hughes has to be listening, has to be talking. So if you're trading the player like Savard or Matheson, again, you've got to get something back that matters, not just a draft pick that is going to potentially maybe make you better 5 years from now. There's got to be a piece that is NHL ready, I would think, unless you're talking about a loaded draft pick, like a first-round pick or whatever the asking price is. So I'm not skeptical of those names, because those names are on trade bait lists, and I've heard those names from other general managers, but I think at this stage of the season, it's going to be a costly transaction.
We're not on Marcus Pettersson news, but he's playing on a team that's got a .391 points percentage, looking up at the Montreal Canadiens. Now, I respect the fact the Penguins don't want to embarrass Sidney Crosby, and Sid doesn't want to get to a level of frustration. I mean, nothing drastic is going to happen there, but you just don't want to frustrate a legend, right?
Right.
So trading away everybody is probably not, in order.
No.
But what do you do if you're Pittsburgh? You are what you are. You're very clearly not a very good team, and you can get something for all these players. How much pressure is on Dubas to act now rather than wait till the deadline?
Well, not a ton, because look, Kyle is in it for the long term here, and I mean that literally and figuratively. When you look at the contract that he negotiated to become the boss of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Of course it's difficult with Crosby and with Evgeny Malkin and Chris Letang. And those are guys who are loyal and committed. And they believe that there is enough there that they can climb out of this hole. They're not able to show that. They're just not. And I don't think that Dubas is in the market for life preservers. I think he's looking at what he has expiring, guys with term of a year, maybe 2 years, and moving out those pieces. So Marcus Pettersson's name has been out there for a while. And Dubas is no different than a lot of teams who, at the very least are taking hold of a project here. Not a rebuild, but a project. So he as well is looking for young NHL players and prospects and the draft picks and all of that. I would say that among the general managers most active, he's right at the top of the list. And maybe that's to a sense of urgency, but I think that there's a different feel around Kyle Dubas and the Pittsburgh Penguins than there would be around Barry Trotz and the Nashville Predators. Barry kind of went all in, didn't he, in the offseason, and acquiring the pieces that he added to the roster of the Predators, and it's failed. You could argue that it's failed miserably. Dubas knew what he was getting into. He tried to bring in some reinforcements, and we see that in Erik Karlsson and some of the other pieces that he brought in and has traded some of them away, but now recognizes that there has to be some sort of kind of managed teardown, if you will. But Pettersson is one of the many people. Just look at their list of unrestricted free agent forwards in Pittsburgh, too.
It's unbelievable.
And all of those guys are available via trade, and Marcus Pettersson is part of the group.
San Jose might be amongst the first to sell. We know that's a multi-year project. To be specific, Mario Ferraro, no one's trading Ray, and Cody Ceci. Dregs, you think he could be amongst the first defensemen to move here as a UFA to be on a bad team?
Well, I don't know if he's among the first, Matt, but I would say that, he's definitely a player that Mike Greer would be listening on. And I think that Cody Ceci gets a bad rap because we can remember some struggle days back with the Ottawa Senators and kind of look at his career in general. But I want to look to his more recent stop, and that was the year they had last year, specifically with the Oilers. And I think he was a key part of that team going as deep as they did in the playoffs. And, people in that organization who I trust say that on many nights, so their most responsible, reliable, persistent, consistent defenseman, Matthias Ekholm. Okay, not a news flash, no surprise there. Cody Ceci on a number of nights would be the second player on that team, defensively speaking. And that hasn't been lost on Oilers fans and by people around the National Hockey League. And now when you look at that Edmonton blue line, I know Stan Mullman wishes we'd stop talking about his blue line, but you kind of have to. And the loss of Cody Ceci, the trade of Cody Ceci, is a part of why. And a part of why the Oilers are as inconsistent as they are. So, what would it take to get Cody Ceci? I'm not so sure, but I do know that Barry Trotz is looking for players with some experience who can maybe provide a little bit more push, but also give him a little bit of long-term stability. Wow, sorry, I'm getting confused here. I'm thinking about Ceci and the San Jose Sharks and going back to Barry Trotz. But it's an interesting development across, because now I'm thinking of, as I talk, I'm thinking of Nashville's blue line and some of the moves that Trotz might be willing to make, and flipping that over to San Jose and what they might be willing to do with the Sharks. So there's lots of names. I'd throw another one out there from Columbus, and that's Provorov. And calls are just coming left, right, and center to Don Waddell. But I think in recognition of that, he's going to just keep his powder dry unless somebody steps up and gives him something that he can't turn away from. But when you get so many calls as a general manager, then maybe it's best to just sit and wait, because those calls probably are going to intensify until one of those pieces on that blue line actually does get moved.
Staying with the bottom of the West, Blake was asking me about Connor Murphy in Chicago, a defensive defenseman with term remaining.
And I would like that. I haven't heard that name out there, but when I look at the Chicago Blackhawks, I think that Kyle Davidson has to be willing to consider just about anything, doesn't he? Like, everything that they hoped was going to help Connor Bedard and their young pieces develop just hasn't been that. And it's not to a lack of effort when you look at some of the older players that they have with the Chicago Blackhawks, but it just isn't working. And now we're seeing, Bedard play on the wing. Well, you drafted him as a franchise player centerman. He hasn't forgotten how to play the position, even though you don't like how maybe he's playing it at the NHL level. It's just, there has to be a higher level of patience in the development of this young piece. So Davidson has to be looking and open to just about anything that comes his way. But I look at Connor Murphy, and you look at the games played. A long time ago, I was told by a coach, you don't know what you've got an NHL defenseman until he's played 300 NHL games. Well, Connor Murphy has played, close to 700? and he's a 31-year-old D-man. He's a $4.4 million cap hit, so that wouldn't be a perfect fit for every team, but if his name is out there, we need to figure it out, and I'm sure he'd draw a crowd.
While we've spoken, guys, I've gone down a Cody Ceci rabbit hole. He's got stats on both sides. Like, it would be a great debate because the guy eats 20 minutes a night every night and has throughout his entire career. His plus minus, which is a bit of an archaic stat, has been very good on bad defensive teams, but his Corsi's terrible. His PDO is favorable, so he should have better Corsi than he does. Right. But he does start his zone starts are 66% for his career, basically. He's always starting in the defensive zone, or the majority of the time. So really, you can debate Cody Ceci till you're blue in the face. There's sort of evidence on both sides about how good a defensive player he is.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I mean, the analytics people will be after me when I say this. I'm in his camp as being a fan of his game.
Yeah.
And I think the reason I'm there now at this stage of his career is because he's comfortable in his own skin and the type of game that he can provide. He's no longer trying to be something that he isn't. He's not getting caught up mentally in the mistakes that are being made. He is dependable. And doesn't that sound like a defenseman that a lot of good teams around the National Hockey League would want and would need? So makes a lot of sense. And then just to wrap up the D-core, you guys have probably talked about him before. I keep wondering about Cam Fowler and what's going to become of him in Anaheim this season. I mean, that's not a name that's new, but it's a curious one. And I think he still has game left. I do. I think that there's still game left in Cam Fowler. So
with Fowler, Ceci, and others, guys, like, the Canucks wouldn't be, if the Canucks are talking Canucks, they wouldn't be asking these guys to play 20 minutes, most likely when healthy.
Well, I mean, if you're playing the second pair, you're playing 20 minutes or thereabouts.
18 minutes. It'll be lower.
Yeah. I mean, in some cases, they certainly wouldn't be asking them to take the matchups that some of these guys might be taking
in previous stops.
Playing higher up the lineup.
I just as we're chatting here, and I'm not going to throw out a crazy name like Shabbat or somebody like that, but Ottawa is floundering as well right now, right? And, the one area of depth that Steve Stales worried about going into the season was on defense. Now they've got Artem Zub, who looks like he's gone for 4 to 6 weeks. So I'm not suggesting that Ottawa has anyone on their blue line in play. Healthy? Maybe, because they've got to do something to shake up that core. Because right now, their goaltending isn't good enough, and that's unthinkable when you look at the acquisition, the extension of Linus Ullmark, and they're all over the place up front. And it's not a 1-game or a 2-game exercise. They're a full-fledged losing skid. So I don't think they've got the assets. Yeah, I don't think they've got the assets on the blue line to shake things up, but we'll keep an eye on Stales and company.
Yeah, we saw that Saturday night. They're quite cranky there after 5 in a row, and losing Zub is only going to magnify problems for Travis Green, our old friend, and the Ottawa Senators. On Fowler, he's on IR right now as well, so something to watch there. Dregs, last week you told us about the imminent return of Thatcher Demco. You can sort of pinpoint it a little clearer now?
A little bit, but man, every week we have this conversation. I want to talk about, Thatcher Demco in the net and getting a start. And we haven't been able to do that. And, I applaud the Vancouver Canucks and Thatcher for being as patient as they've had to be. My information is that they expect him to get a start on this road trip. It's probably going to be towards the end of the road trip, but that was information that I received as late as last night. So again, they're not pushing him, but he would be a welcome addition. And not much to update on the JT Miller file, fellas. As we know and we respect, he needs time. The club isn't going to push him in any way, shape, or form. And what I'm hearing is that even though, look, they're on the road for seemingly ever, it's still at this stage, stuff can change day by day. Unlikely that JT Miller is going to be ready to go when they get back from the road. He's going to need a bit more time after that.
Yep. Just quickly, Besser, have you picked up anything? He practiced in a non-contact on Friday, so things are looking good there. Would you anticipate Besser at some point this week?
Yeah, just simply that he's progressing, right? And in that's good news. He's, once the non-contact jersey comes off, then you'd like to give him a good skate, maybe 2 in a perfect world, and then have at it. But that decision will be made in concert between Brock Boeser and obviously the medical people in Vancouver.
Brilliant stuff. Darren, thank you for this. We'll catch up next Monday.
Okay, guys, have a great week.
If you are struggling with things like managing stress, anxiety, relationships, or divorce, reach out to the counselors at Advanced Counseling. Book your free initial consultation today at advancedcounseling.ca.
Sick Harrison Price from the historic Wall Center. Where? If you got your tickets for the big game, why not make it a full experience? Stay downtown at the Wall. Call the hotel, 604-331-1000. Ask for the Sick Harrison Price rate. Some blackout dates apply based on availability. Well, a stunner from Vancouver Whitecaps FC today. They fire head coach Vanni Sartini after 3 years and 3 months on the job. I'm going to say my piece, and then
Sure.
You fill in the context here as the guy who calls their games on Apple TV. For me, this is curious and reminds a little bit of the hasty moves on Tater Torderson going way back to their first MLS year, and to a lesser degree, Mark DeSantos after that embarrassing loss to Pacific FC. He was 59, 50, and 38 in all competitions, and that's wins, losses, ties. He won 3 straight Canadian championships and playoff games, if not playoff series. Now, in defense of the move, Vanni has embarrassed the club, that 6-game suspension, going after that referee as strongly as he did at the end of last season. And there were other suspensions and games missed beyond that, but he brought a beloved face to the club, something they didn't have with other coaches. He distributed good vibes around the community. He got into local media. He got the team into local media, which, as we know, is not as robust as it used to be, because people like talking to him and hearing from him. And that's important when you're the number 3 team in the market behind the Canucks and the Lions. Did he not? Axel Schuster took responsibility here, and I'll read the statement. I took my time with this decision. It was not taken lightly. We have taken important steps in each year, and is now the right time for someone else to lead this group on the pitch with a fresh and new energy. We have started the process to find our next head coach, and we look to take the steps and build a championship contender in MLS, and as well as continental tournaments. We have long talked about how Axel and Vanni, a bit of an odd couple, right? The stoic, methodical, business-like German and the free-spirited Italian. Did the humor, the levity, the antics, the open book tactics, because he was happy to share the unorthodox style of play, ultimately, was that too much for Axel to bear?
I don't think there's any personality clash here. That's not.
Well, they both handle, like Vanni is quoted in the statement, so they are leaving on amicable terms.
Oh, totally, yeah. And he, cherished his time here. I don't think it has anything to do with that. I think they ultimately just saw it as a little bit more black and white of, you didn't get us into the final 8, and
okay, but who has?
No, but they felt with 3 DPs finally signed by the team in particular, and the second straight year in which they had bolstered the roster, that there deserved to be a little bit more winning. Now,
I hear that the third DP came awfully late and wasn't in shape because of the time when you added him, but nevertheless, that was Armstrong, of course.
I think there's a bunch of different ways that you can support the decision. I still, even with all those things in my back pocket, I would say I thought they'd give him one more year. I thought they'd give him one more try, at least to start the season with Armstrong in shape, with Armstrong in camp. And we saw that there's something special there with him and Ryan Gauld just burgeoning a little bit. So it's surprising for me. I wonder if it's a little bit of the case of the St. Louis Blues. We'll see how fast they act in that. There's a supporter shield coach out there right now in Jim Curtin. Maybe they moved fast because they felt like he would work. I'll say this about Vanni Sartini. He's, first of all, personally, love the man. I'm going to miss him dearly. Honestly,
who wouldn't?
He's just a gem of a guy.
He makes your day better.
He does. He's an amazing guy. And I think he's actually, in a time where I question how many great humans are out there on the planet. I think he's a great human. I honestly do. And his suspensions are the worst moments of his personality. But on the whole, I actually think he's a great human being. So all that being said, he's an unorthodox coach. He asks different things of players that they don't normally get asked to do. I think that he did not get anything out of a Richie Larea signing last year, and that's a very good player that you should have shown better in a Whitecaps kit. I think Junior Hoylett to some degree as well, because they just don't often get. And I think Dier Ocampo, who got brought in here mid-season as well, the Colombian, I think he was having trouble in the Vanni system as well, which is why you didn't see much of him at the end of the season as well. So I think the organization maybe saw a few moments of that, and I'm just guessing here, and thought he's so hard to find players that work in his system that it really handicaps us a little bit. Now, that being said, guy like Fafa Picault, career year with Vanni. Brian White, career with Vanni. Career-making stint with Vanni. And, of course, Ryan Gaul didn't seem to have much trouble with Vanni's system either. So when it works, it works.
Berhalter, like even other players developed here.
Down the ranks, there's players that developed
guys
as well.
on the back line developed here.
Veselinovic.
So that's why, look, the reason I'm going to bring up Torderson and Dos Santos is because we'll take Axel's word for it that this is his decision. But there have been times in Whitecaps past when a coaching change has followed, from my view, out of emotionally erratic decisions from ownership. Torderson, they moved on in 2 months in the MLS season because for some reason they thought winning a couple of games early meant they were playoff contenders in year one. Was never the case. Dos Santos got turf because they lost a game at Pacific FC that I think was embarrassing for the club. There have been many a times during the course of their MLS existence where I have felt that Vancouver Whitecaps ownership, if not management as well, have been out of touch with the market. And I think that because Greg Kerfoot is so strong-willed and so strong-minded, I'm not sure there's a lot of room to be influenced. What I will say is when nobody in your fan base is asking for this and you make the move proactively, you put a lot of pressure on the next guy, and you open yourself up to a lot of second guessing because the Caps had something under Vanni that they had not had under previous coaches. And that was a guy, a central figure for the club who people in this community gravitated to.
Well, and if the incoming guy isn't quite the character of Vanni, and few are,
he won't be.
Then he better make up for it in wins.
It
better be demonstrably better in terms of wins. Because wins, as much as I think Vanni, we've talked about this before, few in the history of sport coaches have brought people to the yard. Vanni might be on that short list, honestly. I really think that he really connected with fans. So if you're going to get a guy that doesn't connect with fans like that, then it's got to be wins bring people to the yard regardless.
And the other thing that we talked about, look, there is competitive imbalance in MLS. You will find Comets. You will find clubs that don't spend to the top. Columbus is one. Portland's one in MLS that occasionally break through. But for the most part, it's a competitively imbalanced league. For the most part, it's the teams that spend heavily that succeed. There's a lot of LA and New York in these playoff games, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're not going to realistically be championship contenders year in, year out, and so far Vancouver Whitecaps have not been championship contenders year in, year out, as we talk about every year, the Canadian Championship is a pretty nice proxy, right? To get over and make sure you're the best team in Canada, better than your two MLS rivals, that is a consequential trophy for the club and for a lot of their supporters. When you take a look at the attendance and the turnout for these Canadian Championship finals this year, notwithstanding. It's all about winning now for Vancouver Whitecaps FC. And look, if the next guy doesn't win as much and does so without the same friendliness and approachability that Vanni brought to the club, he's going to be in tough, and I would suspect that Vancouver Whitecaps will be in tough as well.
And in a multilingual league like MLS, he spoke all the languages.
Right.
He could communicate with every player on the pitch, literally, even the Japanese player by the end of it.
No, exactly.
I mean, that's a nice thing to have.
Communication was never wanting with Vanni in any language.
One other thing, if it is Curtin, again, no indication officially that it's going to be Jim Curtin.
Where do you win his supporter shield?
With Philadelphia, who have of the big cities of the United States have a very low budget, actually. Philly operates on a budget. They develop players. So
Axel has name-checked them in the past as kind of a model for
that's right.
Whitecaps.
So it'd be an interesting hire in that regard. Curtin would come in knowing I can do something even if we're not going to be leading the league in salary.
How about the Seattle Seahawks? They beat Arizona 16-6, and Blake, they are now the 3rd seed in the NFC playoffs. They gain on the entire division with San Francisco losing in Green Bay and the Rams losing at home to Philadelphia. They hold Arizona to 298 yards. 127 of those were gained in the final 2 drives when they're desperately trying to come back. The new middle linebacker, Ernest Jones, has made a big difference. Plus, Devon Witherspoon and Kobe Bryant are now balling out. Man, do they look good with the way they're playing in the secondary. They are at the dysfunctional New York Jets on Sunday, where the word is coming off the bye. Aaron Rodgers doesn't want to play for the Jets in 2025 and may, in fact, want his release this year so that he can join somebody else. It is all turning up Seahawks right now for rookie head coach Mike McDonald as the rest of the division stumbles and fumbles and as they find some of their game here in November.
Does 11 wins get you a bye in this division with a 9-2 Vikings?
No, Detroit gets the bye, right? So everybody else is playing in round 1, and I don't think they're catching Detroit. The home field advantage is the discussion, though. Yes. And, of course, if you win the NFC West, you will get home field advantage. It is quite a story being authored down the I-5. Farhan Lalji reports that the BC Lions north of the border here have asked for permission to interview Saskatchewan Roughriders offensive coordinator Mark Mueller for their head coaching position. Farhan says that the Leos are casting a wide net here. Meanwhile, the Bombers have asked the Lions for permission to speak to their offensive coordinator Jordan McSimmet for their OC position in the event they lose Buck Pierce to a head coaching job. To me, that sounds like Buck Pierce is the front runner here to be the new head coach of the BC Lions. Mueller, incidentally, is the grandson of Ron Lancaster, Saskatchewan Roughriders great. Ronnie's daughter married while they were in.
I'm just having this epiphany now. How many times in history have the Whitecaps and Lions both been without a coach?
Exactly. At the same time, we got dual coaching searches going on here.
That's bizarre.
Yeah, although, one in the aftermath of a thoroughly disappointing season, one in the aftermath of a, by their standards, a halfway decent.
It was still lowercase d disappointing because I think people wanted the one round, but, still weird time.
The Blue Jays non-tender Canadian closer Jordan Romano. This after non-tendering the lefty Genesis Cabrera. So 2 potential solutions to a broken bullpen are now not under contract, deepening the hole for the Jays.
Romano's had health issues, though.
He has, but when healthy, he's been pretty darn good. I continue sort of to not understand what Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro are doing with that club. I continue not to understand why they are employed by that club after. What did they tell ownership? By year 10 will be great? Honestly. Shapiro, I sort of understand because you had a full renovation of your stadium going on and he was the president. Okay, fair enough.
It's Jim Benning.
But at some point, is it not about winning there?
It's Jim Benning like patience.
It's
honestly,
incredible.
it's the same. It's what are you waiting for?
Yeah, no, it's and I mean, there's a long off season to go here. Not many of the dominoes have started to fall. There are plenty of reliever options out there, and relievers year to year can be a little bit erratic, but it is
still looks like the no plan.
It really does. It really does. Mm-hmm. Poll question results. Surrey Mitsubishi poll question results from Friday. Are you certain the Canucks make the playoffs? This was pretty close. Yes or no? What did the people say?
They said yes.
Say? Yes, they said yes.
64.
54. No, really? 52. Sorry. 52-48 it finishes up.
So I'm glad people actually paid attention to the word certain. I think that's what brought that number down.
Graham, I said no simply because this year will either turn out that everyone comes back at the right time so we make a run, but more likely is that everyone comes back at different times and no one can gel and we miss the playoffs by 4 to 6 points. Wow. Mike from Surrey, Pacific is not what I expected it to be with Calgary being so good. I'm not confident. LOL. Jay, the Heart Plumber, says, excellent question. If you believe they can, then continuing to accrue cap space and make an impact trade at the deadline. If not, then they need to shake things up now or alternatively ride it out, weaponize the cap space, take on bad contracts for assets, reload for next year. That is not happening.
Let me ask you this.
Jay.
If we had just asked the question using these words, do you think the Canucks make the playoffs? I think it's a way bigger number,
of
right?
course it is. Of course it is. Of course it is. Vanley Good takes. They're pretenders right now. Only 2 of their 9 wins have come against playoff caliber teams in Florida and LA, barely getting W's versus San Jose, Pittsburgh, Chicago, Calgary, Anaheim. Philly is unconvincing while being embarrassed by other playoff teams. Errors and omissions from yesterday's program, from Friday's program, and I've got a clean sheet. Anything to self-report?
I can remember. No, I've got it written.
In that case, thanks for joining us, everybody. Appreciate you spending some time and connecting with us. Please do subscribe to all our assorted channels, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. Follow on social. That's X, Facebook, Insta, TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky. I joined Blue Sky on the weekend.
Did you?
Yeah, I sure did. And, of course, support the community sponsors you hear us talking
The water's
about.
warm.
Keep it local.